Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. Here at the live studios at the Sannyas Quarters in Radha Lane, Houston, Texas, just down the road, just down the street, just down the way from Sri Sri Radha Nilabandava's temple. And we're here with a small group of Rasika devotees, the devotees that have the most taste for hearing about Krishna. And this is the purpose of doing what we're doing, chanting Hare Krishna, reading Srimad-Bhagavatam, Krishna Prasadam, the deities, the association of the devotees. It's all meant to give us a taste for hearing about Krishna, to make us attached to Krishna. So this is Srila Prabhupada gave his life to us, and particularly to translate and comment on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. This was his magnum opus, his life's work. This and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the Gita, these three books especially. So they're very dear to him, and we become dear to him if they become dear to us. So I thank you very much, Hare Krishna. And I thank all of you out in cyberspace for being there for us and following this epic reading of the Srimad-Bhagavatam out loud. I don't think it's being done every day like this anywhere else. That's the only place in the world where you can get this. And the Bhagavatam class is there, but to get this much of pure Prabhupada, purports all at once, it's unique. So we thank all of you. Okay, let's hear Srila Sanatana Goswami's prayer glorifying the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram, the glories, the prayer that glorifies the Srimad-Bhagavatam by Srila Sanatana Goswami. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kali Dvandodita Ditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are all Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my great fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Hatini Chochata Kada Hanamun Chagadachin Mam Premnarit Kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached the 28th chapter of the 4th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, in which Narada Muni is continuing the allegorical story of Puranjana. He's preaching it or explaining it to King Prachinavarishad, who needs to hear the subject, because he's too attached. So Puranjana represents him, and Narada is going to continue to explain to him what's happened. Chapter 28. Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Text 1. The great sage Narada continued, "My dear King Prachinabarishat, afterward the king of the Yavanas, whose name is fear itself, as well as Prajvara, Kalyakanya, and his soldiers began to travel all over the world." Purport. The period of life just prior to death is certainly very dangerous, because usually at this time people are attacked by the weakness of old age, as well as many kinds of disease. The diseases that attack the body are compared here to soldiers. These soldiers are not ordinary soldiers, for they are guided by the king of the Yavanas, who acts as their commander-in-chief. The word Dishtakarina indicates that he is their commander. When a man is young, he does not care for old age, but enjoys sex to the best of his satisfaction, not knowing that at the end of life, his sexual indulgence will bring on various diseases which so much disturb the body that one will pray for immediate death. The more one enjoys sex during youth, the more he suffers in old age. There we have the conch shell of Maya confirming this truth. Hare Krishna. Let the conch shell blow until it goes by. Text 2. Once the dangerous soldiers attacked the city of Puranjana with great force. Although the city was full of paraphernalia for sense gratification, it was being protected by the old serpent. Do you remember what the old serpent is? Life air. Yeah. Purport. As one's body engages in sense gratification, it becomes weaker and weaker daily. Finally, the vital force becomes so weak that it is herein compared to a weak serpent. The life air has already been compared to the serpent. When the vital force within the body becomes weak, the body itself also becomes weak. At such a time, the death symptoms, that is, the dangerous soldiers of death's superintendents, Yamaraj, begin to attack very severely. According to the Vedic system, before coming to such a stage, one should leave home and take sannyas to preach the message of God for the duration of life. Haribol. However, if one sits at home and is served by his beloved wife and children, he certainly becomes weaker and weaker due to sense gratification. When death finally comes, one leaves the body devoid of spiritual assets. At the present time, even the oldest man in the family does not leave home, being attracted by wife, children, money, opulence, dwelling, etc. Thus, at the end of life, one worries about how his wife will be protected and how she will manage the great family responsibilities. In this way, a man usually thinks of his wife before death. According to Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam jajantante kalevadam tam tam evaiti konteya sadhatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. At the end of life, a person thinks of what he has done throughout his whole life. Thus he gets another body, dihantara, according to his thoughts and desires at the end of life. One overly addicted to life at home naturally thinks of his beloved wife at the end of life. Consequently, in the next life, he gets the body of a woman. And also he acquires the results of his pious or impious activities. In this chapter, the acceptance of a woman's body by King Puranjana will be thoroughly explained. Text 3. Gradually, Kalakanya, with the help of dangerous soldiers, attacked all the inhabitants of Puranjana's city, and thus rendered them useless for all purposes. Purport. At the fag end of life, when the invalidity of old age attacks a man, his body becomes useless for all purposes. Therefore, Vedic training dictates that when a man is in his boyhood, he should be trained in the process of brahmacharya. That is, he should be completely engaged in the service of the Lord and should not in any way associate with women. When the boy becomes a young man, he marries between the ages of 20 and 25. When he is married at the right age, he can immediately beget strong, healthy sons. Now female descendants are increasing because young men are very weak sexually. A male child will be born if the husband is sexually stronger than the wife, but if the female is stronger, a female child will be born. Thus it is essential to practice the system of brahmacharya if one wishes to beget a male child when one is married. When one reaches the age of 50, he should give up family life. At that time, one's child should be grown up so that the father may leave the family responsibilities to him. The husband and wife may then go abroad to live a retired life and travel to different places of pilgrimage. When both the husband and wife lose their attachment for family and home, the wife returns home to live under the care of her grown-up children and to maintain aloof from family affairs. The husband then takes sannyas to render some service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the perfect system of civilization. The human form of life is especially meant for God realization. If one is unable to take to the process of Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life, he must be trained to accept these principles at the fag end of life. Unfortunately, there is no training even in childhood, nor can one give up his family life even at the end. This is the situation with the city of Puranjana, figuratively described in these verses. Text 4. When Kalakanya, daughter of time, attacked the body, the dangerous soldiers of the king of the Yavanas entered the city through different gates. Then they began to give severe trouble to all the citizens. Purport. The body has 9 gates, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, mouth, rectum, and genitals. When one is harassed by the invalidity of old age, various diseases manifest at the gates of the body. For example, the eyes become so dim that one requires spectacles, and the ears become too weak to hear directly. Therefore, one requires hearing aids. The nostrils are blocked by mucus, and one has to always sniff a medicinal bottle containing ammonia. Similarly, the mouth, too weak to chew, requires false teeth. The rectum also gives one trouble, and the evacuation process becomes difficult. Sometimes one has to take enemas and sometimes use a surgical nozzle to accelerate the passing of urine. In this way, the city of Puranjana was attacked at various gates by the soldiers. Thus, in old age, all the gates of the body are blocked by so many diseases, and one has to take help from them, from so many medicines and surgical appliances. This is far out because these things are just, every single person has these parts of their bodies and they all go through it. But generally speaking, in materialistic society, people don't talk about these things so directly, isn't it? So when you hear it like put so clearly, and then it just opens up, you know, what's actually going on here. What's the actual fact. It's so liberating. So liberating. Text 5. When the city was thus endangered by the soldiers and Kalakanya, King Puranjana, being overly absorbed in affection for his family, was placed in difficulty by the attack of Yamunaraj and Kalakanya. Purport. When we refer to the body, we include the external gross body with its various limbs, as well as the mind, intelligence, and ego. In old age, these all become weak when they are attacked by different diseases. The proprietor of the body, the living soul, Haribol, becomes very sad at not being able to use the field of activities properly. In Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly explained that the living entity is the proprietor of this body, Kshetragya, and that the body is the field of activities, Kshetra. When a field is overgrown with thorns and weeds, it becomes very difficult for the owner to work it. That is the position of the spirit soul when the body itself becomes a burden due to disease. Extra burdens are placed on the body in the form of anxiety and general deterioration of bodily functions. Text 6. When King Puranjana was embraced by Kalakanya, he gradually lost all his beauty. Having been too much addicted to sex, he became very poor in intelligence and lost all his opulence. Being bereft of all possessions, he was conquered forcibly by the Gandharvas and the Yavanas. Purport. When a person is attacked by the invalidity of old age and is still addicted to sense gratification, he gradually loses all his personal beauty, intelligence, and good possessions. He thus cannot resist the forceful attack of the daughter of time. Text 7. King Puranjana then saw that everything in his town was scattered, and that his sons, grandsons, servants, and ministers were all gradually opposing him. He also noted that his wife was becoming cold and indifferent. Purport. When one becomes an invalid, his senses and organs are weakened. In other words, they are no longer under one's control. The senses and sense objects then begin to oppose him. When a person is in a distressed condition, even his family members, his sons, grandsons, and wife become disrespectful. They no longer are under the command of the master of the house. Just as we wish to use our senses for sense gratification, the senses also require strength from the body in reciprocation. A man keeps a family for enjoyment, and similarly, family members demand enjoyment from the head of the family. When they do not receive sufficient money from him, they grow disinterested and ignore his commands or desires. This is all due to one's being a kripana, miser. This word kripana, used in the 6th verse, is in opposition to the word brahmana. In the human form of life, one should become a brahmana, which means that one should understand the constitutional position of the absolute truth, Brahman, and then engage in his service as a Vaishnava. We get this facility in the human form of life, but if we do not properly utilize this opportunity, we become a kripana, miser. A miser is one who gets money but does not spend it properly. This human form of life is especially meant for understanding Brahman, for becoming a brahmana, and if we do not utilize it properly, we remain a kripana. We can actually see that when one has money and does not spend it, he remains a miser and is never happy. Similarly, when one's intelligence is spoiled due to sense gratification, he remains a miser throughout his life. Text 8. When King Puranjana saw that all his family members, relatives, followers, servants, secretaries, and everyone else had turned against him, he certainly became very anxious, but he could not counteract the situation because he was thoroughly overwhelmed by Kalakanya. Purport. When a person becomes weak from the attack of old age, the family members, servants, and secretaries do not care for him. He is then unable to counteract this. Thus he becomes more and more anxious and laments his frightful condition. Text 9. The object of enjoyment becomes stale by the influence of Kalakanya. Due to the continuance of his lusty desires, King Puranjana became very poor in everything. Thus he did not understand the aim of life. He was still affectionate toward his wife and children, and he worried about maintaining them. Purport. This is exactly the position of present civilization. Everyone is engaged in maintaining the body, home, and family. Consequently, everyone becomes confused at the end of life, not knowing what spiritual life and the goal of human life are. In a civilization of sense gratification, there cannot be spiritual life because a person thinks only of this life. Although the next life is a fact, no information is given about it. Text 10. The city of King Puranjana was overwhelmed by the Gandharva and Yavana soldiers, and although the king had no desire to leave the city, he was circumstantially forced to do so, for it was smashed by Kalakanya. Purport. The living entity separated from the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead tries to enjoy this material world. He is given a chance to enjoy it in a particular type of body, beginning with the body of a Brahma down to that of a microbe. From the Vedic history of creation, we can understand that the very first living creature was Lord Brahma, who created the 7 great sages, the other Prajapatis, to increase and other Prajapatis to increase the universal population. Thus, every living entity, according to karma, his past desires and activities, gets a particular type of body, from that of Brahma to that of a microbe or germ in stool. Due to long association with a particular type of material body, and also due to the grace of Kalakanya and her Maya, one becomes overly attached to a material body, although it is the abode of pain. Even if one tries to separate a worm from stool, the worm will be unwilling to leave. It will return to the stool. Similarly, a hog generally lives in a very filthy state, eating stool, but if one tries to separate it from its condition and give it a nice place, the hog will be unwilling. In this way, if we study each and every living entity, we will find that he will defy offers of a more comfortable position. Although King Puranjana was attacked from all sides, he was unwilling to leave the city. In other words, the living entity, whatever his condition, does not want to give up the body. But he will be forced to give it up, because after all, this material body cannot exist forever. The living entity wishes to enjoy the material world in different ways, and therefore, by nature's law, he is allowed to transmigrate from one body to another, exactly as a person transmigrates from the body of an infant to a child, to a boy, to a youth, to a man. This process is constantly going on. At the last stage, when the gross body becomes old and invalid, the living entity is reluctant to give it up, despite the fact that it is no longer usable. Although material existence and the material body are not comfortable, why does the living entity not want to leave? As soon as one gets a material body, he has to work very hard to maintain it. He may engage it in different fields of activity, but whatever the case, everyone has to work very hard to maintain the material body. Unfortunately, society has no information of the soul's transmigration, because the living entity does not hope to enter the spiritual kingdom for eternal life, bliss, and knowledge. He wants to stick to his present body, even though it may be useless. Consequently, the greatest welfare activity in this material world is the furthering of the Krishna consciousness movement. This movement is giving human society information about the kingdom of God. There is God, there is Krishna, and everyone can return to God and live eternally in bliss and knowledge. A Krishna conscious person is not afraid of giving up the body because his position is always eternal. A Krishna conscious person engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord eternally. Therefore, as long as he lives within the body, he is happy to engage in the loving service of the Lord. And when he gives up the body, he is also permanently situated in the service of the Lord. The saintly devotees are always free and liberated, whereas the karmis, who have no knowledge of spiritual life or the transcendental loving service of the Lord, are very much afraid of giving up the rotten material body. Text 11. Under the circumstances, the elder brother of Yavanaraj, known as Prajwara, set fire to the city to please his younger brother, whose other name is Fear itself. Purport. According to the Vedic system, a dead body is set on fire, but before death there is another fire, or fever, which is called Prajwara, or Vishnu Dwara. Medical science verifies that when one's temperature is raised to 107 degrees, a man immediately dies. This Prajwara, or high fever, at the last stage of life, places the living entity in the midst of a blazing fire. How many of you have had a fever of more than 105? I had one of 106.2 when I was in Spain. I got a very heavy, what do they call that? It was an infection in the system. And my fever went to 106.2. And they had to inject me with antibiotics. And I had, in the middle of the night, I had to douse myself with alcohol to keep myself in the body. And about, when was it? I don't know how long it took, but there was one night, and the whole time, in my mind, I was chanting. I just kept chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting, you know? And then one night I had a kind of like, it wasn't a dream, it was like a hallucination. And this little man came, white hair and white beard and white frock, and he came in front of my vision, and he was in front of a curtain. And he went like this, he went, chant over here. And then he opened the curtain, and there was this beautiful idyllic scene with a nice pond with lotuses, a swan, and overhanging branches with flowers and everything. And I went, okay. And I went in there and started chanting, and the fever broke. But I know what it means. When you go to 107, that's it. It was very close. It was very sobering, and I learned a lot, and I was never the same since. Text 12. But when we're young, we don't think about this, you know. So we must hear these things, and we actually must come to the point of realizing that it's true. You know, that at some point in time, we are going to have to go through this, every one of us. And human life is meant to prepare for it. The animals cannot prepare for this, but a human being can prepare for it. Okay, not to bore you with further details. Text 12. Okay, Hare Krishna. When the city was set ablaze, all the citizens and servants of the king, as well as all family members, sons, grandsons, wives, and other relatives, were within the fire. King Puranjana thus became very unhappy. Purport. There are many parts of the body: the senses, the limbs, the skin, the muscles, blood, marrow, etc. And all these are considered here figuratively as sons, grandsons, citizens, and dependents. When the body is attacked by the Vishnu Dwara, the fiery condition becomes so acute that sometimes one remains in a coma. This means that the body is in such severe pain that one becomes unconscious and cannot feel the miseries taking place within the body. Indeed, the living entity becomes so helpless at the time of death that although unwilling, he is forced to give up the body and enter another. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that man may, by scientific advancement, improve the temporary living conditions, but that he cannot avoid the pangs of birth, old age, disease, and death. These are under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of material nature. A foolish person cannot understand this simple fact. Now people are very busy trying to find petroleum in the midst of the ocean. They are very anxious to make provisions for the future petroleum supply, but they do not make any attempts to ameliorate the conditions of birth, old age, disease, and death. Thus a person in ignorance, not knowing anything about his own future life, is certainly defeated in all his activities. Text 13. The city superintendent of police, the serpent, saw that the citizens were being attacked by Kalakanya, and he became very aggrieved to see his own residence set ablaze after being attacked by the Yavanas. Purport. The living entity is covered by two different types of bodies, the gross body and the subtle body. At death we can see that the gross body is finished, but actually the living entity is carried by the subtle body to another gross body. The so-called scientists of the modern age cannot see how the subtle body is working in carrying the soul from one body to another. This subtle body has been figuratively described as a serpent, or the city's police superintendent. When there is fire everywhere, the police superintendent cannot escape either. When there is security and an absence of fire in the city, the police superintendent can impose his authority upon the citizens, but when there is an all-out attack on the city, he is rendered useless. As the life air was ready to leave the gross body, the subtle body also began to experience pain. 14. As a serpent living within the cavity of a tree wishes to leave when there is a forest fire, so the city's police superintendent, the snake, wished to leave the city due to the fire's severe heat. Purport. It becomes very difficult for snakes to leave a forest when there is a fire. Other animals may flee due to their long legs, but serpents, only being able to crawl, are generally burnt in the fire. At the last stage, the limbs of the body are not as much affected by the life air as the life air. Text 15. The limbs of the serpent's body were slackened by the Gandharvas and Yavana soldiers who had thoroughly defeated his bodily strength. When he attempted to leave the body, he was checked by his enemies. Being thus baffled in his attempt, he began to cry loudly. Like when we go to a movie, right? See a movie and there's a big war scene and everybody's getting, we're going, yeah, you know, we're like entertained by it. But when we hear about what's really going to happen to us, then we think, oh, this is too much. This is, pessimism. Why are you so pessimistic? Always thinking about death and this and that. But no, we're joyful thinking about it. We're joyful because we know what's going to happen to us at death. We're going back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Purport. So we'll also cry loudly, but we'll cry, Hare Krishna, and we'll jump back to Krishna and get out of this holocaust that is called the material world. Purport. At the last stage of life, the different gates of the body are choked by the effects of disease, which are caused by an imbalance of bile, mucus, and air. Thus, the living entity cannot clearly express his difficulties, and surrounding relatives hear the sound gura gura from a dying man. In his Mukunda Mala Stotra, King Kulashekar states, Krishna Tudiya Padapankaja Pancharantam Advayame Vishatumana Saraja Hansaha Prana Prayana Samaye Kapavata Pitai Kantavarodana Vidau Smaranam Kutaste. My dear Krishna, please help me die immediately, so that the swan of my mind may be encircled by the stem of your lotus feet. Otherwise, at the time of my final breath, when my throat is choked up, how will it be possible for me to think of you? The swan takes great pleasure in diving within water and being encircled by the stem of the lotus flower. This entanglement is sporting joy. If in our healthy condition we think of the lotus feet of the Lord and die, it is most fortunate. In old age, at the time of death, the throat sometimes choked with mucus or blocked by air. Sometimes becomes choked with mucus or blocked by air. At such a time, the sound vibration of Hare Krishna, the Mahamantra, may not come out. Thus one may forget Krishna. Of course, those who are strong in Krishna consciousness cannot possibly forget Krishna at any stage, because they are accustomed to chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, especially when there is a signal from death. Hare Krishna. Text 16. King Puranjana then began to think of his daughters, sons, grandsons, daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, servants, and other associates, as well as his house, his household paraphernalia, and his little accumulation of wealth. Purport. It is not infrequent for a person overly attached to the material body to request a physician to prolong his life for at least some time. If the so-called scientific physician is able to prolong one's life for a few minutes through the use of oxygen or other medicines, he thinks that he is very successful in his attempts, although ultimately the patient will die. This is called the struggle for existence. At the time of death, both patient and physician still think of prolonging life, although all the constituents of the body are practically dead and gone. Text 17. King Puranjana was overly attached to his family and conceptions of I and mine. Because he was overly attracted to his wife, he was already quite poverty-stricken. At the time of separation, he became very sorry. Purport. It is clear in this verse that at the time of death, thoughts of material enjoyment do not go away. This indicates that the living entity, the soul, is carried by the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. Due to false ego, the living entity still wants to enjoy the material world, and for want of material enjoyment, becomes sorry or sad. He still makes intellectual plans to further his existence, and therefore, although he gives up the gross body, he is carried by the subtle body to another gross body. The transmigration of the subtle body is never visible to material eyes. Therefore, when one gives up the gross body, we think that he is finished. Plans for material enjoyment are made by the subtle body, and the gross body is the instrument for enjoying these plans. Thus, the gross body can be compared to the wife, for the wife is the agent for all kinds of sense gratification. Because of long association with the gross body, the living entity becomes very sad to be separated from it. The mental activity of the living entity obliges him to accept another gross body and continue his material existence. The Sanskrit word stri means expansion. Through the wife one expands his various objects of attraction, sons, daughters, grandsons, and so on. Attachment to family members becomes very prominent at the time of death. One often sees that just before leaving his body, a man may call for his beloved son to give him charge of his wife and other paraphernalia. He may say, "My dear boy, I am being forced to leave. Please take charge of the family affairs." He speaks in this way, not even knowing his destination. Text 18. King Puranjana was anxiously thinking, "Alas, My wife is encumbered by so many children. When I pass from this body, how will she be able to maintain all these family members? Alas, she will be greatly harassed by thoughts of family maintenance. Purport. All these thoughts of one's wife indicate that the king was overly engrossed with the thoughts of woman. Generally, a chaste woman becomes a very obedient wife. This causes the husband to become attached to his wife, and consequently, he thinks of his wife very much at the time of death. This is a very dangerous situation, as is evident from the life of King Puranjana. If one thinks of his wife instead of Krishna at the time of death, he will certainly not return home back to Godhead, but will be forced to accept the body of a woman and thus begin another chapter of material existence. Text 19. King Puranjana then began to think of his past dealings with his wife. He recalled that his wife would not take her dinner until he had finished his. We just heard that it was just the opposite. Whatever she was doing, he would follow. But now he's thinking the opposite. And that she was always very much attached to him, so much so that if he would sometimes become angry and chastise her, she would simply remain silent and tolerate his misbehavior. Purport. A wife is always supposed to be submissive to her husband. Submission, mild behavior, and subservience are qualities in a wife which make a husband very thoughtful of her. For family life, it is very good for a husband to be attached to his wife, but it is not very good for spiritual advancement. Thus, Krishna consciousness must be established in every home. If a husband and wife are very much attached to one another in Krishna consciousness, they will both benefit because Krishna is the center of their existence. Otherwise, if the husband is too much attached to his wife, he becomes a woman in his next life. The woman, being overly attached to her husband, becomes a man in her next life. Of course, it is an advantage for a woman to become a man, but it is not at all advantageous for the man to become a woman. Text 20. King Puranjana continued thinking how, when he was in a state of bewilderment, his wife would give him good counsel, and how she would become aggrieved when he was away from home. Although she was the mother of so many sons and heroes, the king still feared that she would not be able to maintain the responsibility of household affairs. Purport. At the time of death, King Puranjana was thinking of his wife, and this is called polluted consciousness. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Mamaivang jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha manak shastranindriyani prakriti stani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal, fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. The living entity is, after all, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Spirit, Krishna. In other words, Krishna's constitutional position and the living entity's constitutional position are the same qualitatively. The only difference is that the living entity is eternally an atomic particle of the Supreme Spirit. Mamaivangsho, jivaloke, jivabhutak sanatanaha. In this material world of conditional life, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord, the individual soul, is struggling due to his contaminated mind and consciousness. As part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the living entity is supposed to think of Krishna. But here we see that King Puranjana, the living entity, is thinking of a woman. Such mental absorption with some sense object brings about the living entity's struggle for existence in this material world. Since King Puranjana is thinking of his wife, his struggle for existence in the material world will not be ended by death. As revealed in the following verses, King Puranjana had to accept the body of a woman in his next life due to his being overly absorbed in thoughts of his wife. Thus, mental absorption in social, political, pseudo-religious, national, and communal consciousness is cause for bondage. During one's lifetime, one has to change his activities in order to attain release from bondage. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Yagyartat kamanonyatra lokoyam kamabandhanaha. If we do not change our consciousness in this life, whatever we do in the name of social, political, religious, or communal and national welfare will be the cause of our bondage. This means we have to continue in material, conditional life. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Manak Shastranindriyani Prakriti Stani Karshati. When the mind and senses are engaged in material activities, one has to continue his material existence and struggle to attain happiness. In each and every life, one is engaged in the struggle to become happy. Actually, no one in this material world is happy, but the struggle gives a false sense of happiness. A person must work very hard, and when he attains the result of his hard work, he thinks himself happy. In the material world, people do not know what real happiness is. Sukham atyantikam yad buddhigrayam itindriyam. Bhagavad Gita 6:21. Real happiness must be appreciated by one's transcendental senses. Unless one is purified, the transcendental senses are not manifest. Therefore, to purify the senses, one must take to Krishna consciousness and engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Then there will be real happiness and liberation. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:8, Shariram yad avapnoti yach chap yut kramati shwaraha grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandan ivashayat. The living entity in the material world carries his various conception of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. As the wind passes over a garden of roses, it will carry the aroma of roses. And if it passes over a filthy place, it will carry the stench of obnoxious things. Similarly, King Puranjana, the living entity, now passes the air of his life over his wife, a woman. Therefore, he has to accept the body of a woman in his next life. We'll stop there. 5:29, almost an hour. Hare Krishna. So this is sobering stuff. It's like I always use the probably use the example of you're intoxicated, you're drunk or something, and somebody comes and pours a bucket of ice water on your head. Sobers you up very quickly. So this is the sobering. It's the medicine, actually. When we're healthy and we hear this, we become joyful. And when we're not healthy and we hear this, we become morose. Because we think we're thinking too much about negative things. Yes, sir, even though it's reality. Please. Marcus.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the reading. So do microbes obtain benefit from us chanting Hare Krishna?
Hey, this is a good question. Well, microbes may or may not get benefit from the chanting because they don't have senses. They don't have ears. Some living entities who can hear sound, they get benefit immediately. But microbes and stuff, they'll get benefit if they're inside your body when you take prasad. Because whatever, some of them just live for a few minutes or a few days or a few hours or whatever. But they'll get benefit because you put prasad inside the body. But there's a gradual evolution, of consciousness. Darwin looked at the Padma Purana, which describes very in minute detail the hierarchy of bodies, at least a sample of them. And he got the idea of the bodies evolving and all this survival of the fittest and all, all these things, permutations and combinations and all these things, chemical evolution. But it's a fact that the soul is moving from one body to another, and there's a hierarchy of life forms that come to Brahma. Actually, that's the top life form in the universe. But the human body is like a pivotal point. When you get a human body, then you can decide. The other bodies, plants and animals and insects and fish and birds, they all, if they're allowed to live out the natural life and die of old age, they automatically go to the next grade of body up, automatically. And if you take the life of one of them and prevent them from going to the next, then you take reaction, serious reaction for that. That's why the human society now is suffering so much from killing so many innocent animals and not allowing them to live out their lives. It's unthinkable, actually. I mean, it's becoming not only thinkable, but watchable.
Does that include eating the plants?
Does that?
Does eating plants incur reactions?
No, because, well, first of all, generally speaking, you take the fruit or the vegetable from the plant and it doesn't die. It dies later on. But when you take grains, rice or wheat or other grains, then they wait until the plants die. That's why they get golden before they harvest. The golden means that the plant has died, and then they take the grains. You take milk from a cow doesn't die. Now they're so attached to meat because they think they need blood for protein and proper maintenance of the body. But the milk is nothing. Cow is nothing but a transformation of the milk, of the blood rather. So that's the way it's meant to be by the law of nature. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Thank you, Keshav Bharati Maharaj. I understand that Bhaktivinoda Thakur made a very important distinction about maintaining health, but would he separate this kind of maintaining the body artificially really long? Was he more focused on being able to communicate with other living entities is health, or not a coma or something?
Bhaktivinoda Thakur was completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. He didn't think about these things at all. He ate very little, and he was absorbed. He only slept 2 hours a day, and he was complete. He wrote 100 books. At the same time, he was a magistrate for the government, and he used to do the same number of what took a whole day for an ordinary judge to do the case and write it up and make a decision, he would do in 2 hours, or 1 hour, 2 hours. So all of his docket was done, and everybody was so impressed, and even the English who were in charge in those days all wanted him to be around them. So but he always was Krishna conscious. He was always preaching that we should become Krishna conscious. So he wasn't so much interested in, health and all these different things, because if we become fully Krishna conscious, then whatever is our destiny will be worked out or lived out in the best way possible. You can't change the prarabdha karma in our bodies unless you become fully Krishna conscious. There's a verse that Rupa Goswami prays in his Namastaka, 8 prayers to the holy name, and one of those verses says, Yad Brahma Sakshat Kritinishchayapi Vinasham Ayati Vinana Bhogaihi Apaitinamas Purinena Tate Prarabdha Karmati Virauti Vedaha. O holy name, the Vedas declare that meditation on the impersonal Brahman cannot bring freedom from karmic reactions, that they must be enjoyed or suffered. that when you manifest yourself, but that when you manifest yourself in one's consciousness, all karma at once disappears. So at the point, this was what Bhaktivinoda was preaching, because he was following exactly in the footsteps of the 6 Goswamis, Rupa Goswami in particular. Prarabdha karma, there's different stages of karma. There's the subtle, unmanifested seed that hasn't become a seed yet, because it's still subtle and a desire. And then when you get the desire, then it becomes a seed. And when you think about it, it takes another form. And when you act it out, it takes another form. Like that. And the prarabdha karma is the body and the mind are the mature sinful reactions from all of our activities, or pious, not just sinful, but pious also. The mature, pious, and sinful reactions in this gross material body. But if Krishna manifests himself in your heart, if you learn to chant the holy name without offense, in other words, if you can realize that the holy name and Krishna are the same, then you immediately become relieved of all your prarabdha karma. And that in that way, in that state of consciousness, we live in the body, and the material body goes on. All the same things go on until it's time for the body to pass on. But inside, the soul is not doing anything. He's with Krishna, doing his devotional service. That's a very, very elevated stage. Very few devotees attain that stage, but it's possible. So, we don't worry about, what kind of living beings have what kind of things, our body, what this, that. We just leave it to Krishna. Absorb your mind in Krishna. Absorb your mind in preaching and activities of Krishna consciousness, and leave the results to Krishna. That doesn't mean we neglect the body. We keep the body in healthy because it belongs to Krishna. We see it as belonging to Krishna, and therefore we want to take care of it as nice as we can. Okay, who's next? Yes. Carter.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. We earlier read about in the timing of leaving the material body, the gross body, you're carried by the subtle body. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the relation between the material, subtle, and spiritual body.
Well, the spiritual body has senses and mind and intelligence, everything, but it's made of a different substance. In the material world, the gross body is made of earth and water, of fire, air, and ether. That's the 5 gross elements. And the subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are it's very subtle science, but it's science nonetheless. The form is there, and the form is made of those constituents. You can break it up in different ways. You can break it down into chemicals and elements and all those, but the basic elements are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Right? And the subtle body is also a form, but it's formed of different energies. It's formed of subtle energies of mind, intelligence, and false ego. And the spiritual body has all the constituents and all the abilities that the subtle body is inert. The subtle and the gross body are inert. They can't actually feel and taste and smell and touch and all those things. This is gross, but if you tourniquet your arm, you cannot feel it, and you can cut it, you can put pins in it, and you won't feel it. Consciousness is going throughout the body by the airs and the liquids that are going throughout the body in all the different tubes. The consciousness is spread throughout the body like that. And also in subtle air, life air. But the spiritual body is made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It's got a body. It looks like a body, but it's made of different energies. And those energies are not under the control of material nature. They're not affected by material nature. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Nainam chintanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, nachainam klediyantyapo, na shoshayati marata. The soul cannot be cut by weapons. It can't be burnt by fire. It can't be withered by the wind. It can't be dried by air. That's the nature of the soul, of the subtle body, of the spiritual body. So the spiritual body is inside, and because the spiritual body has a form with all the different senses, you can feel and touch and be attracted. But that attraction is mixed with the effects or the influence of the gross and subtle material elements. So when we leave the body, just like now you have long hair, because in your mind you want to. Otherwise you wouldn't have it. And someday the mind may change and you may, shave up and be a brahmachari, who knows. But these things are going on, the skirts are going up, the skirts are going down, the hair is going longer, the hair is going shorter. All these different fads and fashions are going on. Why? Because of the subtle desires, because of the desires of the human living entities, the souls in the human bodies. So like that, the influence of the subtle body, the mind, the desires or product. The subtle body is like a factory which manufactures desires. Prajahita yada kaman sarvan partam manogatan. Mano means mind. Gatan means makes. So the mind manufactures desires. That's what the mind is. Factory for manufacturing desires. And when you leave your body, the desires that are there in the front, that you're meditating on, that you're always thinking about, that kind of body you'll get. Just like we have this kind of body with this, we dress the way we do, we are, because what? Because we're Krishna conscious. We're trying to think of Krishna all the time. And we have orders and desires of our spiritual master. Please Krishna. So when the subtle body is thinking, this is a classic example, Puranjana. He's thinking of his wife at the time of death, so he takes a woman's body. A man's thinking of a woman at the time, but he takes a man's body, woman's body. And then the soul goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until the subtle body becomes confused. Sometimes the body comes out, it's in a male body, but it's remembering it's got a male mind. Well, that's a problem. That's going on a lot nowadays, and it's heading in that direction also. Did you know that in Sweden, Denmark, anyway, one of the Scandinavian countries, they made a law. Excuse me, I don't know if I can even say this, it's so ridiculous. I'll try my best. They made a law that up until 7 years, the child is allowed to choose his gender. And if the parents tell them one way or the other, they're subject to be punished by the law. Yeah, maybe. It's one of them. And we wonder why there's so much suffering going on in the world, and so much confusion, and so much fighting between different kinds of bodies, it's all due to the body. That what we're hearing now, although sometimes you kind of grimace because, is it really going to be like that? Is this the way it is? Is this what's going on here? Yes. We're dreaming and we want to waken up. Like when we're dreaming and, a tiger's chasing us, we're running, we're saying, get me out of here. And then when we wake up, we go, oh, no, I'm so relieved, I have this recurring dream where I'm trying to get to my train or plane or something, and I forget my bags, And all of a sudden, I don't have my bags, and I'm supposed to get to the train. Because I travel so much in my life. I guess it's just there in my subtle body. I travel so much. And it's just so anxiety-provoking. And then when I wake up, it's, such a relief. Just a dream. So we don't get we worked up when we're in the dream. We get worked up, but then when it's over, then we get immediate relief and we don't think about it anymore. It's gone. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it's gone. I mean, sometimes it's a very relishable when you'll try to hang on to it for a while, or try to have the same one next something, or go back to sleep and get to the same place. It's a movie about that sometimes. Yeah. Anyway. Yes, Carter, you had something else you wanted to say? Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much. But I was also going to add is, just as we have interchanged material bodies, does the same happen with the subtle body? Is the subtle body eternal, like the spiritual body?
No, the subtle body, as long as one has material desires, one has the subtle body. The subtle body changes, but it's the same subtle body, but the desires are different, and therefore we get another gross body according to the desires at the end of the life, at the end of our present gross body. But when the soul leaves the material world altogether, then the subtle body drops off as well, and the spiritual body leaves, free from the gross and the subtle body. You can do that if you chant Hare Krishna without offense, 24/7. Yes, Lily. We got to go quick because there's a program going to go over.
Can you repeat what the offenses are when chanting?
The first offense is to blaspheme. Blaspheme means to unnecessarily criticize or find fault with Vaishnavas. Any Vaishnava, but particularly Vaishnavas who are actually spreading Krishna consciousness. The second offense is consider the holy name of Krishna or the holy name of Shiva or Brahma or the demigods to be equal to the holy name of Vishnu or Krishna. Because the demigods have material bodies. Krishna has a purely spiritual body, and he's the supreme person. So if you compare those two and think that they're equal, that's an offense against the holy name of Krishna. The third offense is to consider the spiritual master to be an ordinary person, and how that manifests physically is to disobey his order. The fourth is to blaspheme the Vedic literatures or any literatures in pursuance of the Vedic version. And the fifth offense is to consider the glories of the holy name to be imaginary, to not be real. And the sixth offense is to give some mundane interpretation on the holy name. The seventh offense is to commit a sinful life or commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. That means I'm thinking the holy name is all-powerful and can relieve me of all reactions of sinful activities. So it's okay if I do this sin, because when I get home I can chant Hare Krishna and I'll get relief from the reaction. That's called chanting on the strength, or sinning on the strength of the chanting of Hare Krishna. That's most this one and the Vaishnava Aparad are the most serious. And the eighth is to consider the chanting of Hare Krishna to be like a ritualistic ceremony for some kind of fruitive gain. Like if we're trying to serve the holy name, we're not trying to take service from the holy name. If we try to take service from the holy name, we're chanting because we want something, or because it's a religious ritual or something like that. The ninth offense is to explain the intimate glory details of the glories of the holy name to a person who has no faith or who doesn't believe it. Because what can happen is that person will just, criticize, make an offense himself, and then you get involved in that offense. You're an accomplice in that offense because you helped cause it. And the 10th offense is to not have complete faith in the holy chanting of the holy name, even after you're understanding so many instructions in the matter. In other words, to give up the chanting of Hare Krishna after you've understood what it is. And on top of that, there's inattentive chanting, because inattentive chanting leads to the others. Those are the holy name, the offenses against the holy name. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much. We have one from the cyberspace. Sorry.
Jivamaya Devidasi asks, Hare Krishna Maharaj, I apologize if this isn't directly relevant, but when is the right time for an aspiring devotee to visit the holy Dham?
I can't answer that question absolutely because it's different for each person. When you want to. When you want to bad enough, then you'll go visit the holy Dham. And I might add, you should understand that if you do nonsense in the holy Dham, then just as when you chant Hare Krishna or do some devotional service in the holy Dham, you get 100 times benefit, more than any other place. Maybe it's 1,000 times. It's 100 or 1,000. Anyway, but when you do some sin in the Dham, then you get 100 or 1,000 times the reaction. So go to the holy Dham when you can follow the regular principles and not break the regular principles. And if you're weak, and if you think I can do that for a certain amount of time, then don't stay past that amount of time. That's all I have to say about that. It depends on each individual case. Okay, thank you, Jivamaya. Thank you, Narada Muni. Thank you, all the assembled Vaishnavas. Gaur Premanandi, Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night at what time? Did you turn it off already? 4:30. You didn't? What time is it? See you tomorrow at 4:30 Central Time, USA. Hare Krishna.